David stared out the airplane window as the city lights grew smaller below. Another business trip was ending, another deal was closing, and another few $1,000,000 would soon hit his bank account. At 43 years old, he had everything most people dreamed of. A mansion in the hills, luxury cars in his garage, and a business empire that kept growing every single day. But as he leaned back in his first-class seat, something felt empty inside his chest. He tried to push the feeling away like he always did. Success required sacrifice, he told himself. His father had taught him that. Work hard, make money, and everything else would fall into place. The flight attendant smiled as she offered him champagne. He declined with a wave of his hand. His mind was already racing ahead to tomorrow's meetings, the contracts that needed signing, and the conference call with investors in Tokyo. Time was money, and David never wasted either. His phone buzzed with a text message. It was from his assistant, Jennifer. "Girls are doing well. Maria says they got good grades on their math test. See you next week." David felt a small pang in his stomach. Lucy and Rose, his 8-year-old twins, had taken a math test this week. He had forgotten. Again. When was the last time he had actually helped them with homework? When was the last time he had even asked about school? The truth was, he barely knew his own daughters anymore. After his wife died 3 years ago, everything had changed. The girls needed someone to take care of them, and David needed someone reliable. That's when Maria came into their lives. Maria Rodriguez was 34 years old and had been a teacher before she started working for rich families. She had great references, spoke perfect English, and seemed to understand what the girls needed. David hired her within a week of their first meeting. She would live in the guest house, take care of Lucy and Rose, and make sure they had everything they needed. And she did her job perfectly. The girls were always clean, well-fed, and on time for their private lessons. They took piano on Mondays, French on Wednesdays, and art classes on Fridays. David had signed them up for all the best programs money could buy. These activities would give them advantages in life, just like his father had given him. David remembered his own childhood differently than most people might expect. His father had been wealthy too, but he had also been demanding. Every grade mattered. Every opportunity had to be seized, and every moment had to be productive. Money doesn't grow on trees, his father used to say, but it does grow when you plant the right seeds. Now David was planting those same seeds for Lucy and Rose. Private school, expensive tutors, language lessons, music instruction, they would have every advantage he could give them. They would never want for anything. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was a business partner calling from London. David spent the next hour discussing market trends and investment opportunities. By the time he hung up, the plane was beginning its descent. The airport was busy even at 11 o'clock at night. David's driver was waiting outside in the black sedan, just like always. The ride home took 40 minutes through empty highways and quiet neighborhoods. David used the time to check his emails and review tomorrow's schedule. As they pulled through the gates of his property, David looked up at his house for the first time in 2 weeks. Every window was dark except for one small light in what used to be his wife's office. Maria probably left it on for him. She was thoughtful about things like that. The house felt huge and quiet when he stepped inside. His footsteps echoed on the marble floors as he walked toward his study. He paused outside the girls' bedroom door and listened. Nothing but silence. They had been asleep for hours, of course. 8-year-olds went to bed early, especially on school nights. David had missed dinner again. Actually, he had missed many dinners. When was the last time he had eaten a meal with his daughters? He couldn't remember. There was always another meeting, another deal, another opportunity that couldn't wait. In his study, David poured himself a drink and sat behind his desk. The room was lined with awards and photographs from business events. In one corner stood a picture of him with the mayor, shaking hands after donating money to the children's hospital. In another frame, he was receiving an award for Businessman of the Year, but there were no recent pictures of Lucy and Rose. David opened his laptop and started reviewing contracts for tomorrow's meeting. Numbers and legal language filled the screen, the same kind of work that had made him rich. He was good at this, making deals, solving problems, building wealth. This was what he understood. A few hours later, exhaustion finally caught up with him. David closed the laptop and headed upstairs to his bedroom. As he passed the girls' room again, he stopped and quietly opened the door just a crack. In the dim light from the hallway, he could see them sleeping peacefully. Lucy was curled up with a stuffed elephant that looked old and worn. Rose was sprawled across her bed with her arms flung wide, the way children sleep when they feel completely safe. They looked so much like their mother when she was young. The same dark hair, the same peaceful expressions. David felt that empty feeling in his chest again, stronger this time. He wanted to go in and kiss their foreheads, but he was afraid he might wake them up. Besides, what would he say if they opened their eyes? He had been gone for 2 weeks. They probably barely remembered he lived here. David closed the door softly and went to his own room. Tomorrow would be another busy day. More meetings, more decisions, more money to be made. The girls would go to school, take their lessons, and do their homework with Maria's help. Everything would run smoothly, just like it always did. As he lay in bed, David tried to convince himself that this was enough, that providing for his daughters financially was the same as being a good father, that working hard today would give them a better tomorrow, that missing dinner tonight meant they could have anything they wanted for the rest of their lives. But deep down, in a place he tried not to think about, David wondered if he was wrong. He wondered if his daughters would rather have a father who came home for dinner than one who could buy them anything they wanted. He wondered if they missed him the way he missed their mother. But morning would come soon, and with it would come more work, more deals, and more reasons to push those wondering thoughts away. David closed his eyes and tried to sleep, not knowing that everything was about to change in ways he never could have imagined. 3 weeks. That's how long David was supposed to be in Singapore working on the biggest deal of his career. The Meridian Group wanted to buy his company for $2 billion. $2 billion. The number still made his head spin every time he thought about it. But on day 10 of the trip, everything fell apart. David sat in his hotel room at 4 a.m, staring at his laptop screen in disbelief. The email from his lawyer was short and brutal. Deal is off. Meridian found irregularities in their own financial reports. They're pulling out completely. Sorry, David, these things happen. These things happen. David wanted to throw his laptop across the room. He had spent months preparing for this deal. Months of meetings, presentations, and negotiations. He had hired the best lawyers, the best accountants, the best consultants money could buy. And now it was all over because of problems on their end, not his. The hotel room felt too small suddenly. David got up and paced to the window, looking out at the Singapore skyline. The city was beautiful, full of lights and life, but all he wanted to do was go home. There was no point staying here anymore. No more meetings to attend. No more hands to shake. No more deals to make. At least not this week. David called his assistant Jennifer as soon as it was morning in California. "Book me on the next flight home," he said without saying hello first. "The deal's dead." "Oh no, David, I'm so sorry," Jennifer said. She had worked for him for 5 years and knew how much this deal meant to him. "Should I reschedule your meetings for next week?" "Cancel everything for the rest of the week," David said. He was already throwing clothes into his suitcase. "I need some time to think about what comes next." The flight home seemed to take forever. David tried to sleep but couldn't stop his mind from racing. $2 billion gone just like that. He kept thinking about all the opportunities that money could have created, the investments he could have made, the security he could have built for Lucy and Rose. But maybe this was a sign. Maybe he needed to step back and look at other options. There were always other deals, other buyers, other opportunities. David had built his company from nothing once. He could do it again if he had to. By the time the plane landed in Los Angeles, David had already started making mental lists of potential investors and partnerships. The Singapore deal was dead, but his business wasn't. He would find another way forward. He always did. The drive home from the airport was quiet. David's driver, Robert, could tell he wasn't in the mood to talk. They drove through the familiar streets in silence, past the shopping centers and office buildings that made up David's world. It was Tuesday afternoon when they pulled through the gates of his house. David looked at his watch. 4:15. The girls would be home from school by now, probably doing homework or practicing piano. Maria always kept them on a strict schedule, which David appreciated. Structure was important for children. David paid Robert and grabbed his suitcase from the trunk. The house looked exactly the same as when he left, of course. The same perfect landscaping, the same clean windows, the same expensive cars in the driveway. Nothing had changed except David's bank account. which was now $2 billion lighter than he had expected. He used his key to enter through the side door that led into the laundry room. David preferred this entrance because it was quieter and didn't set off the main alarm system. He could get inside and settled before letting anyone know he was home. Maybe he would surprise the girls at dinner. When was the last time he had done that? But as David set his suitcase down and walked toward the main part of the house, he heard something that made him stop in his tracks. Laughter. Not just any laughter, but the kind of pure, joyful sound that comes from children who are truly happy. David stood perfectly still and listened. When was the last time he had heard Lucy and Rose laugh like that? Really laugh. Not the polite giggles they gave him when he showed them expensive gifts or told them about his business trips. The sound was coming from the kitchen. David could hear Maria's voice too, but he couldn't make out what she was saying. She sounded different somehow, warmer, more animated than the polite, professional tone she always used with him. David walked quietly down the hallway toward the kitchen, his footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. As he got closer, he could hear more of the conversation. Maria was talking about something that made the girls ask excited questions. He heard Rose say something about helping people and Lucy asking, "Can we make extra ones?" Extra what? David wondered. What were they talking about? He reached the kitchen doorway and stopped. The scene in front of him was nothing like what he expected to find in his own home. The large marble kitchen island was covered with bread, jars of peanut butter and jelly, plastic bags, and what looked like ingredients for sandwiches. Lucy and Rose were standing on step stools, wearing aprons that David had never seen before. Their school uniforms were protected by the aprons, but their sleeves were rolled up and their hands were busy spreading peanut butter on slices of bread. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was what Maria was saying as she helped them work. "Remember, girls, each sandwich we make is going to help someone who doesn't have enough food today," Maria said, her voice gentle but serious. "These are real people with real names and real stories. There's Mr. Johnson, who used to be a teacher before he lost his job, and Mrs. Peterson, who takes care of 3 grandchildren all by herself." David felt his jaw drop. Maria was talking about homeless people in his kitchen with his daughters. Lucy looked up at Maria with wide eyes. "Will they really like our sandwiches?" she asked. "They'll love them," Maria said, smiling. "But more than that, they'll know that someone cares about them. Sometimes that's even more important than the food." Rose carefully placed a finished sandwich into a plastic bag. "My mom used to say that helping others makes your heart grow bigger," she said quietly. "I think she would like that we're doing this." David's breath caught in his throat. Rose was talking about her mother, his wife. When was the last time the girls had mentioned their mother to him? When was the last time they had shared a memory like that? Maria nodded and gently touched Rose's shoulder. "Your mom would be very proud of both of you," she said. "She always believed that the best way to honor someone you love is to love others the way they loved you." David stood frozen in the doorway, watching his daughters work with a focus and joy he had never seen from them before. They weren't just making sandwiches. They were doing something that mattered to them. Something that connected them to their mother's memory and to the world beyond their privileged life. And David had no idea any of this was happening. David couldn't move. He stood in the doorway like a statue, watching his daughters make sandwiches for homeless people in his $1 million kitchen. This wasn't piano practice. This wasn't French lessons. This wasn't anything he had ever approved or even imagined. Maria continued talking as she helped Lucy fold the plastic bag around her sandwich. "Mr. Johnson always asks about you girls when we visit," she said with a warm smile. "Last week he told me that knowing 2 young ladies were thinking about him made him feel less alone." "Really?" Lucy's face lit up. "He remembers us?" "Of course he does," Maria said. "When someone shows you kindness, you never forget it. That's why what you're doing matters so much." David felt his stomach twist. Visit? They had been visiting these people? Maria had been taking his daughters to see homeless individuals? His mind raced with all the dangers that could involve. Disease, violence, drug addicts, criminals. What was she thinking? Rose finished another sandwich and held it up proudly. "This one's for Mrs. Peterson," she announced. "Maria, can we bring her some cookies too?" "I remember you said she loves chocolate chip cookies." "We can ask your father when he gets home," Maria said. "He might want to help us bake some." David nearly choked. Help them bake cookies for homeless people? Did Maria really think he would approve of any of this? I wish Daddy could meet Mr. Johnson, Lucy said, carefully spreading jelly on a new slice of bread. I think they would like each other. Mr. Johnson knows lots of stories about business, too. He used to work at a bank before... Before what? Rose asked. Maria's expression grew serious. Before life got hard for him. Sometimes good people go through bad times and they need help getting back on their feet. That doesn't make them bad people. It just makes them people who need friends. David watched his daughters nod solemnly, as if they understood something about life that he had never taught them. When had they become so thoughtful about other people's problems? When had they learned to care about strangers? How many sandwiches do we need today? Rose asked, counting the ones they had already made. 15 should be enough, Maria said. There are usually about 12 people at the shelter on Tuesday afternoons, but sometimes a few extra show up. Tuesday afternoons. David's mind was spinning. How long had this been going on? How many Tuesday afternoons had his daughters spent with homeless people, while he thought they were having art lessons or doing extra homework? Lucy wiped her hands on her apron and looked up at Maria. Can I tell you something? She asked quietly. Of course, sweetie. What's on your mind? Sometimes I feel sad that Daddy doesn't know about this, Lucy said. I want to tell him about Mr. Johnson and Mrs. Peterson and all our friends, but I'm scared he won't understand. David's heart stopped. Lucy wanted to tell him about this, but she was afraid of his reaction. What did that say about the kind of father he had become? Why do you think he won't understand? Maria asked gently. Rose looked up from her sandwich making. Because Daddy only talks about business and money, she said matter-of-factly. He doesn't really talk about people except when they can help him make more money. The words hit David like a physical blow. Is that really how his daughters saw him? As someone who only cared about money? Your father loves you both very much, Maria said carefully. Sometimes grown-ups show love in different ways. Your daddy works very hard to make sure you have everything you need. But we don't need more stuff, Lucy said, her voice small. We need him to be here. We need him to care about the same things we care about. David felt tears burning behind his eyes. When was the last time he had asked his daughters what they cared about? When was the last time he had really listened to their answers? Maria must have sensed the girl's sadness because she quickly changed the subject. You know what? Let's make these last few sandwiches extra special. We can add some apple slices to them. Mrs. Peterson mentioned last week that she misses fresh fruit. The girls brightened immediately and started cutting apples with plastic knives under Maria's supervision. David watched them work together, and he realized something that made him feel sick to his stomach. His daughters were happier with Maria than they ever seemed to be with him. They laughed more, talked more, shared more of themselves. With Maria, they were learning about compassion and kindness and caring for others. With him, they learned about being quiet during business calls and not interrupting important meetings. I think that's enough sandwiches, Maria said, surveying their work. Now we need to pack them in the cooler with some ice packs to keep them fresh. Can we make cards too? Rose asked. Like last week? That's a wonderful idea, Maria said. Why don't you both go get your art supplies while I clean up here? The girls ran off excitedly, leaving Maria alone in the kitchen. David watched her begin to clean up the sandwich-making supplies, moving efficiently around his kitchen like she belonged there. Which he realized she did belong there more than he did lately. This was the moment. David knew he should step forward and announce himself. He should demand an explanation. He should assert his authority as their father and the man who paid Maria's salary, but something held him back. Maybe it was the joy he had seen on his daughters' faces. Maybe it was the shame he felt about how they had described him. Or maybe it was the simple fact that he had never seen Lucy and Rose so passionate about anything in their entire lives. His phone buzzed with a text message. David looked down at it automatically, a reflex from years of always being available for business. It was from a potential investor in Japan. David heard about Singapore. Let's talk about other opportunities. Call me other opportunities. More deals. More money. More time away from home. David looked up from his phone to see Lucy and Rose running back into the kitchen with construction paper and markers. They sat down at the kitchen table and immediately started making colorful cards with messages like, "Hope you have a good day," and "Someone is thinking about you." What should I write? Lucy asked Maria. Write whatever is in your heart, Maria said. That's always the right thing to write. David put his phone back in his pocket without answering the text. For the first time in years, someone else's business opportunity would have to wait. He had something more important to deal with. He took a deep breath and stepped into the kitchen. "Hello?" he said quietly. 3 heads turned toward him in surprise. Lucy and Rose's faces broke into smiles, but Maria looked like she had seen a ghost. "Daddy." Rose jumped up from her chair. "You're home early?" "Yes," David said, his eyes moving from his daughters to Maria to the evidence of their secret activity spread across his kitchen. "I can see that I am." The kitchen went completely silent for a moment that felt like hours. Lucy and Rose stared at their father with huge smiles, colored markers still in their hands. Maria stood frozen by the kitchen island, her face pale. "Daddy!" Lucy dropped her marker and ran toward him. "Look what we're making." "We're helping people today." Rose jumped up too, waving her half-finished card in the air. "We made 15 sandwiches. And we're making cards to go with them. Want to see?" David looked down at his daughter's excited faces, then back at Maria, who still hadn't moved or spoken. The evidence of their secret project was everywhere. Sandwich bags lined up on the counter, a cooler with ice packs, colorful cards scattered across the table. "Girls," David said slowly, trying to keep his voice calm, "why don't you go wash your hands and get ready for dinner? Maria and I need to talk." "But we're not finished with the cards yet," Rose protested, "and we still need to pack everything in the cooler." "We can finish them later," Maria said quickly, finding her voice. She was clearly trying to signal the girls to leave. "Go ahead and do what your father asked." Lucy looked confused. "Are you in trouble, Maria? You look scared." David felt his chest tighten. His 8-year-old daughter could see that Maria was afraid of him. What did that say about the kind of person he had become in his own home? "Nobody's in trouble," David said, though he wasn't sure that was true. "Maria and I just need to discuss some things about your schedule. Adult stuff. Very boring." The girls reluctantly left the kitchen, but David could hear them whispering to each other as they walked upstairs. Maria waited until their footsteps disappeared before she finally looked directly at him. "I can explain," she said quietly. "I certainly hope so," David replied. His voice was controlled, but Maria could probably hear the anger underneath. "Because what I just saw doesn't look anything like the piano lessons and art classes I'm paying for." Maria took a deep breath. "The girls still do all their regular activities. This is something we do on Tuesday afternoons after their homework is finished. It only takes 2 hours." "2 hours of taking my daughters to see homeless people," David said. 2 hours of exposing them to God knows what kind of dangers. 2 hours of activities I never approved." "They're not in any danger," Maria said, her voice growing stronger. "We go to Mercy House downtown. It's a clean, safe facility run by the city. There are security guards and social workers there. The people we help are good people who are just going through hard times." David shook his head. "That's not the point, Maria. The point is that you made this decision without asking me. These are my children. I decide what they do and where they go." "You're right," Maria said. "I should have asked you directly instead of just mentioning it to Jennifer." "I thought she would tell you." David paused. "You told Jennifer about this?" "I told her we wanted to do some community service with the girls. She said it sounded nice and that she would add it to their schedule. I thought that meant you had approved it." David closed his eyes. Jennifer managed his calendar and the girls' activities, but she wasn't supposed to approve major changes without his direct input. This was a communication breakdown, but that didn't make him feel any better about the situation. "Even so," David said, "you should have made sure I knew exactly what you were planning. This isn't art therapy or music lessons. This is exposing my daughters to poverty and homelessness and adult problems they don't need to worry about." Maria was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer but more serious than David had ever heard it. "With respect, Mr. David, I think your daughters needed to see those things. They needed to understand that not everyone lives the way they do. They needed to learn that happiness doesn't come from having expensive things." David felt his anger flare. "Are you saying I don't know how to raise my own children?" "I'm saying they have questions you're not here to answer," Maria replied. "And some of those questions are about things that matter more than money." The words stung because David knew they were true. He was rarely home. He did miss most dinners. He did spend more time on business calls than talking to his daughters. "What kind of questions?" he asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Maria hesitated. Maybe we should have this conversation in your study. The girls might hear us. David nodded and led Maria down the hallway to his home office. He closed the door behind them and sat down behind his desk, falling back into the familiar role of being the boss. Maria remained standing. "Tell me what questions they're asking," David said. Maria looked uncomfortable. "Mr. David, I don't want to hurt your feelings. The girls love you very much, just tell me." Maria took a deep breath. "Lucy asked me last month if you still live here, because she sees you so rarely. Rose asked me if you're sick because you always look tired and stressed when you are home. And 2 weeks ago," she stopped, looking like she didn't want to continue. "2 weeks ago what?" "2 weeks ago, Lucy asked me if you love them, because you never seem happy to see them. She said you always look at your phone when they try to talk to you, and you never ask them about their day unless it's something business-related like grades or test scores." David felt like he had been punched in the stomach. "She asked if I love them?" "She did. And I told her that of course you do, that you work so hard because you love them and want to provide for them. But then she said something that broke my heart." David's hands were shaking slightly. "What did she say?" "She said that having everything doesn't feel the same as being loved. She said she would rather have a father who was home for dinner than a father who could buy her anything she wanted." The room went completely quiet, except for the sound of David's breathing. He thought about all the expensive gifts he had bought for the girls over the years. The designer clothes, the latest electronics, the private lessons in everything from languages to musical instruments. He had thought those things were expressions of love. He had thought providing for them financially was the same as being a good father. "They talk about their mother sometimes," Maria continued gently. "They remember how she used to read to them every night and help them bake cookies and ask them about their dreams. They miss having someone who cares about their feelings, not just their achievements." David put his head in his hands. "I don't know how to be the kind of father they need," he admitted quietly. "I only know how to work and make money. That's what my father taught me." "It's not too late to learn," Maria said. "The girls want to love you. They want to share their lives with you. They want you to be proud of them for who they are, not just what they accomplish." David looked up at her. "Is that why you started taking them to help homeless people? To teach them values I wasn't teaching them?" Maria nodded slowly. "I wanted them to understand that the best parts of being human have nothing to do with money. I wanted them to feel the joy that comes from helping others, and I wanted them to know that their mother would be proud of the kind, caring people they're becoming." David sat in silence, thinking about everything Maria had told him. His daughters thought he didn't love them. They missed having someone who cared about their feelings. They had learned more about compassion and kindness from their caretaker than they had from their own father. "What do I do now?" he asked finally. Maria smiled for the first time since he had walked into the kitchen. "You start by finishing those cards with them. And then you come with us to Mercy House so you can meet the people your daughters care about." David looked at her in surprise. "You want me to come with you?" "I think it would change your life," Maria said simply, "just like it changed theirs." David stared at Maria for a long moment. The idea of going to a homeless shelter had never crossed his mind. He donated money to charities, of course. He wrote checks and attended fundraising dinners where other wealthy people wrote checks, but actually going to see where that money went, actually talking to the people it was supposed to help? "I don't know," David said slowly. "I'm not good with situations like that." "Neither were the girls at first," Maria said. Rose cried the first time she saw Mr. Johnson, because she couldn't understand why he had to sleep outside. But you know what happened? Mr. Johnson sat down with her and told her funny stories until she smiled again. He helped her understand that he was still a person with feelings and dreams, just like everyone else. David thought about his daughter crying over a stranger's problems. When was the last time Rose had cried about anything in front of him? When was the last time either of his daughters had shared their real feelings with him? "The girls really want you to meet their friends," Maria continued. "They talk about you to everyone at the shelter. They're proud of their father, even if they don't understand why you're never around." That hit David harder than anything else Maria had said. His daughters were proud of him, but they didn't understand his choices. Maybe it was time for him to stop understanding his choices too. "Okay," David said finally. "I'll come with you. But I want to finish helping them make those cards first." Maria's face broke into a genuine smile. "They're going to be so happy." They walked back to the kitchen together. Lucy and Rose were sitting at the table, waiting patiently with their markers and construction paper spread out in front of them. They looked up hopefully when their parents entered the room. "Can we finish the cards now?" Lucy asked. "Actually," David said, pulling out a chair and sitting down next to his daughters, "I was hoping I could help you make them." The girls' faces lit up like Christmas morning. Rose immediately pushed a piece of paper toward him and offered him a green marker. "What should I write?" David asked. "Write what's in your heart," Lucy said, repeating Maria's earlier words. "That's what Maria always tells us." David looked down at the blank paper. What was in his heart? For years, his heart had been filled with business plans and profit margins and investment strategies. But sitting here with his daughters, watching them carefully draw flowers and smiley faces on their cards, David realized his heart was actually full of love for them. He just hadn't known how to show it. He wrote simply, "Someone cares about you. You matter." Rose leaned over to read his card. "That's perfect, Daddy. That's exactly what people need to hear." They spent the next 30 minutes working on cards together. David found himself laughing at Lucy's jokes and helping Rose spell difficult words. This was what he had been missing all these years. Not just the big moments like birthdays and holidays, but the small, quiet moments when his daughters were simply being themselves. "Are you ready to meet our friends?" Rose asked as they packed the last card into the cooler with the sandwiches. David's stomach was full of butterflies, but he nodded. "I'm ready." The drive to Mercy House took 20 minutes. David sat in the passenger seat while Maria drove, listening to his daughters chat excitedly in the back about the people they were going to see. They knew details about everyone's lives. Mr. Johnson used to teach high school math. Mrs. Peterson had raised 5 children as a single mother. Tommy was only 19 and aged out of foster care with nowhere to go. These weren't just homeless people to Lucy and Rose. They were friends. Mercy House was a simple, clean building with a small parking lot and a sign that read, "Everyone welcome." David had driven past it hundreds of times over the years without ever really seeing it. Inside, the main room was filled with round tables and folding chairs. About 15 people were sitting around, some reading newspapers, others just talking quietly. David was surprised by how normal everything looked. He had expected something scarier, more desperate. Instead, it just looked like a community center where people were spending their afternoon. "Maria, girls." A tall man with gray hair and a warm smile stood up from one of the tables and walked toward them. "You're right on time, Mr. Johnson." Lucy and Rose ran to him and gave him hugs. The man hugged them back like they were his own grandchildren. "And you must be their father," Mr. Johnson said, extending his hand to David. "The girls talk about you all the time. I'm Robert Johnson. Used to teach math at Lincoln High School for 32 years. David shook his hand, surprised by the firm grip and direct eye contact. "David, nice to meet you. Your daughters are special young ladies," Mr. Johnson continued. "They've brought sunshine into this place every Tuesday for months now." We all look forward to their visits. Over the next hour, David met person after person who knew his daughters by name. Mrs. Peterson, who showed him pictures of her grandchildren and asked about Lucy's piano lessons. Tommy, who was taking online college courses, and thanked Rose for encouraging him to keep studying. An elderly woman named Dorothy, who had taught the girls how to knit during previous visits. Each person had a story. Job loss, medical bills, family problems, bad luck, but they also had dignity, kindness, and hope. They weren't the dangerous criminals David had imagined. They were people who had fallen on hard times and needed help getting back on their feet. The most amazing thing was watching his daughters interact with everyone. They remembered details about people's lives. They asked thoughtful questions. They listened with genuine interest when the adults shared their stories or their struggles. This was compassion in action. This was what Maria had been teaching them. As they prepared to leave, Mr. Johnson pulled David aside. "Your girls told me you work very hard to take care of them," he said. "That's admirable. But let me tell you something I learned the hard way. I spent 32 years teaching other people's children, thinking I was making a difference in the world. But I was so focused on my career that I forgot to really know my own son. Now he's grown up and we barely talk." David felt his throat tighten. "I don't want that to happen with my girls." "Then don't let it," Mr. Johnson said simply. "They love you. They want to know you. But more than that, they want you to know them. Really know them. The way they know us." That night at dinner, David did something he hadn't done in years. He put his phone in another room and asked his daughters about their day. Really asked. Not just the usual questions about grades and homework. Lucy told him about a book she was reading about a girl who solved mysteries with her dog. Rose talked about wanting to learn how to paint like the artist they had studied in school. They both shared funny stories about things that had happened at Mercy House in previous weeks. For the first time in their lives, David's daughters had his complete attention. And for the first time in his adult life, David realized that success wasn't measured in dollars. It was measured in moments like this. 3 months later, David had restructured his entire business to work from home 3 days a week. Every Tuesday, he joined Maria and the girls at Mercy House. He had started a foundation that provided job training and temporary housing for people experiencing homelessness. But more importantly, he had become the father his daughters needed. He was present for dinner. He helped with homework. He listened to their dreams and fears and silly jokes. The Singapore deal had fallen through, and David lost $2 billion. But sitting in his kitchen on a Tuesday afternoon, making sandwiches with his daughters and planning their visit to see their friends, David realized he had gained something much more valuable. He had gained his family back, and that was worth more than all the money in the world.